Okay, I think we're live. Sounds like we're live. We're recording. All right, thank you so much, Barnone. What is your actual name? Barnone11970, is that right?
Yeah, the Barnone is just an old nickname I used to get called when I was younger, and the 11970 is actually my birth date. I was born November 9th, 1970.
Ah, okay, Barnone11970. And I think you said in one of your videos that you actually changed your YouTube channel, right? It used to be called something different?
Yeah, it used to be Barnone11970, but I ended up closing it down. Back then, I mean, I was getting a lot of harassment and things like that, and I was new to YouTube, so I didn't know how to handle it. So that lasted about, I think, like 2 days before I'm like, screw that, I'm going back in and going full force, and I've been this ever since.
Yeah, totally. Well, you know, I saw your original videos. I know you've done a lot of different videos. You do a lot of different things, but I originally saw your first video on contract law, and I'd been studying contract law for quite some time. I don't know enough to, I'm sorry to say, I don't know enough to actually do anything with it, but the game is so incredibly intense in terms of the power structure's ability to be so good at contract law that I wouldn't even want to play their game right now. It would be like playing Michael Jordan playing basketball against a kindergartner right now, you know?
Well, the key of it all, it's actually kind of funny because it's the most complicated and yet the most simplistic thing all at the same time once you learn how the game is played. When it comes to any kind of law that they're creating, it's based on the consent of the governed. Like you notice that in our document in itself. It talks about the United States, it's the consent of the governed. Now, what that means is most people assume that consent means you're agreeing to something. That's not necessarily 100% accurate. That is part of the equation. The other part of it is the people don't argue the fact. So their silence is the same as agreeing. So what they try and get people to do is be distracted, first of all. They don't get educated on how law really works. And you don't have to be a lawyer to study law, just like you don't need to be a chef to cook. It helps, but you can look up laws. And once you know you're not supposed to go through a red light, you don't need a certificate to know that. You just study it. So when it comes to laws that are being created, the reason that they work is because we may complain about it, but we don't as a society say, no, this is unacceptable. So when you are silent in law, it's the same as consenting to something. So we could sit there and complain all we want unless the people realize they have the power and majority is what rules. Laws are not going to change. And the best way I've always described it is, because I like putting things in, you can put a mental picture because it makes it seem very simple that way. Mm-hmm. I use the scenario of if you're standing at a bus stop and some idiot comes along and starts repeatedly punching you in the shoulder. Now, if you hold up a picket sign saying how unfair it is and how much it hurts and how surprised you are that this person is doing that, it's not going to stop them. The way to stop a person is to either get away or defend yourself, call the cops, do something. But if you're just standing there with a picket sign saying, oh, this is so unfair, you're not doing anything but advertising something. You're not stopping it. Yeah. So if you ever notice when governments create some kind of situation that people want to protest, they go to a place with a bunch of picket signs saying that they want change, but all they're doing is first giving free advertisement, giving them a chance to actually create new laws, because eventually you see when riots happen because there's too many people that get into one place and it becomes one emotional thing, now all of a sudden they can get the police there to pepper spray everybody and control the situation, mm-hmm. which justifies them making more restrictive laws. So you're actually hurting the cause with what's called drowning in good intentions. So people have to learn that any law in any country, if the people stood up and actually demanded the change, it would happen without a pulling of any trigger. Mm-hmm. And that's the key. Have you heard of those agent provocateurs that usually accompany, when they do protests? And what'll happen is that someone who is a part of like the FBI or something like that will be at a peaceful protest and start causing commotion.
You know, I'm not a big fan of Alex Jones. I don't really follow his work, but he did talk a lot about this, and I thought it was really fascinating.
Yeah, my thing about Alex Jones is this is how I kind of put that scenario. If you have 99 pounds of ice cream and 1 pound of dog manure, and you mix it together, what do you have? You have 100. You have 100 pounds of dog manure.
Right.
So he does help wake up people by learning certain things, but his fear mentality taints everything.
Oh, totally, dude. His stuff, man. I got into it when I first got into this stuff years ago, but I just can't handle it. It's too fearful. It's too negative. It's too, the world's coming down. The world's going to crash. All these things are going to happen, and it's too much that way. It's too disempowering. It's just as disempowering to me watching his stuff as it is just watching conventional news.
He's like first graders stuff for the awakening,
right?
Because if you didn't know it before, he at least gets you on that level. But the purpose behind why he's so successful is fear equals control. And if you haven't noticed, he advertises things that can help you purify your water, things that could save you in times of quote unquote zombie apocalypses and things like that. So he's providing a fear service, and he has many people making thousands, if not millions of dollars off of it by scaring you to say, oh my God, I got to get this stuff right now. So it's a good awakening, but it is definitely, it's like a pond. If you don't flow, you become stagnant. So he's a good stepping on point. But the one thing that you were talking about with basically FBI and CIA agents planting themselves into riots, like I said, when you have 1 or 2 people in a conversation, you can have a disagreement, but you're not going to want to beat the living daylights out of each other. You could usually have a conversation. When you start getting multiple thousands of people in an area, all of a sudden it's almost like one person, and the emotions start really rising. So if you can get somebody to infiltrate it and get people angry, it starts to cause what would have been a good cause into something violent. And like I was saying, that justifies them to now come in and say, oh, look, these people cannot be controlled, so we need to arrest them. We need to create new laws. It's justifying ways to restrict you based on your good intention. So what they do is they take advantage of people's emotion, because you can have 1,000 peaceful protesters, and you put one plant in there where you know there might be alcohol, there might be some drugs, there might be some people that are on the edge, and then somebody just takes a bottle and throws it. Now, all of a sudden, everybody starts going crazy. And you've seen that in peaceful events where they turn like that. Oh, yeah. And then what happens? You see police in full military uniforms with horses and batons batting them. Basically, they're trying to instigate a fight, because if they can get you to attack them, first of all, it takes away from all the protest and the good intention you had, and justifies them to say, we need more laws. And that's why when you look at things like, for example, this Orlando shooting, whether that was staged or not, whether it was real or not, I don't know. I wasn't there. But you notice how they turned it into a whole gun control thing, how they're using a situation to benefit themselves based on fear. And it's also dividing and conquering, because it's getting one segment of the public to hate or mistrust another section. So instead of everybody uniting, which is, like I said, the consent of the governed, divide and conquer, you go in 5,000 different directions. People are too busy fighting themselves instead of seeing the big picture, which would help everyone. And that's the problem. Yeah,
at the very least, if it's not a staged event, which if you do a little research, you know, at least at the very least, there's some really fishy and strange things going on. I'm not one to really say, you know, it was a staged event or not. Like you said, we weren't there, you know. We have no control over what is going on over there. At the very least, it seems and appears to be very fishy. Beyond that, I have no idea if it was real or not. But like you said, if it was a real event, then you know, at the very least, they're using it as that divide and conquer way to separate out people and to start creating all this gun control issues. I mean, it's so obvious to me that even if it's a real event, that's what's going on. It's just right there in plain sight.
Right. And they use the fear to make people not think logically. And I'll give you an example if you can think of it logically, because obviously you and I can maybe disagree or agree on what the event was. But if you look at what the governments are trying to do to step in, they're trying to make you think emotionally and at the moment instead of what logic is. And I'll give you an example. If you were a criminal and you went on a cul-de-sac where there are only two houses, one on either side of the cul-de-sac, one of them has a sign, trespassers will be shot on sight. And across the way, the other house says a sign that says, happy, proud, gun-free zone. If you are a criminal, which house are you going to rob?
Oh, the gun-free zone, obviously.
Right. So if you think logically, now, obviously, if we lived in a perfect world where we didn't need guns, and we could, fly around in electric flying cars and everything and that kind of utopia, that's fine. But in the reality that we're living in, if you think of what they're trying to do, they're trying to scare you into thinking, well, guns are the problem, so we need to get rid of them for you to be safe. But if you notice, all of the shootings, where do they happen? They happen in schools. They happen at movie theaters. They happen at clubs. Why? Because what do they all have in common? They're gun-free zones. So if you're a criminal, first of all, they cannot control prisons. If you've ever watched a TV show about people in prison, they can't stop them from getting cell phones, drugs, gang rapes, like murders. So if they can't control it in the area they send criminals, do you think a law that says, oh, we're not going to have guns anymore, or all of a sudden the criminals will be like, oh, I guess we can't have them? It's to stop the law-abiding citizens from protecting themselves. So if you notice how they use the fear and say, oh, look at this tragedy. So whether it was staged or not is irrelevant. What they're saying is, if we take away the guns, you'll be safer. But yet now, it's only going to affect the law-abiding citizens from protecting themselves. And if you notice where most shootings happen, they happen in already gun-free zones. So they don't want you to think about that. They want you to think about the poor victims, whether it was staged or not, and use that as an opportunity for an agenda. And that's why they try and tell you, for example, things like the Second Amendment are supposed to be for hunting, when it is about protecting yourself against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. And when they say things like, for example, they have said the Orlando tragedy was the worst, the worst event in U.S. history as far as killing people?
Mass suicide.
Right. Do they forget what happened to the American Indians? When our government went against their treaties and killed millions of Indians.
Apparently they haven't read a people's history of the United States.
Well, they don't want to remind people about things. They want you to stay in the moment because they want people to listen to their agenda. That's what propaganda is all about. And they don't mention the things that are relevant. So there's an old saying that says, not telling the truth is the same as lying. And I challenge anybody, because we all believe that our politicians are going to help us. Now, if anybody out there can name 5 politicians in their lifetime, whether it's a mayor, senator, governor, president, you name it, that has kept their word and been nothing but full of honesty, integrity, I would challenge anybody to find 5. And yet these are the people, time and time again, we supposedly trust. But here's where the consent comes in. Because of the fact they're convincing you to be angry at someone else or be afraid of someone else, you're not focusing on the big problem at hand, that the people that are at the top, which are the smaller amount, are controlling the masses because we don't contest what they do. We argue it, we complain about it,
we picket about it.
Right, but we don't change it.
Another thing that's interesting too about this whole thing is the government is always creating, like you said, whether it's a made-for-TV event or whether it's an actual event is irrelevant. But another side to this is that the government is always creating a need for their services, right? They're handing out benefits and privileges and then intersecting and tying those benefits and privileges to things like licenses and things like that and registration, so that all of these things become interconnected and we rely on these things in order to live. So we have to go through the license process or whatever. The other side of the gun thing is if you were to remove guns from people, it creates, who else is going to protect you? It creates, it's like creating a need. It's like if you could all of a sudden snap your fingers and make it so that everybody's thirsty and then you sell water. It's like if you remove guns from people, then who else is going to be able to protect you other than what they say on the news every night, the authorities. They keep saying that word over and over again, authorities, but they're not any authority over me. They're self-proclaimed, but they're creating the need within them. And they have the solution because they're the only ones that can protect us.
It's called problem, reaction, solution. They cause the problem, it causes a reaction, and they come up with the savior event. Like I've said in examples in other videos that I've made, is if you want to become famous and you didn't know how, and you figured, you know what if I save somebody? But you go looking around and you don't find anything. So you're like, I have to find a way where I can actually come out looking like a hero and saving somebody. I'll become famous, and who knows, maybe I'll make millions of dollars writing a book. So you decide, you realize your next door neighbors, they have a 1-year-old child. And every now and then the parents will go out maybe to go buy cigarettes for 5 minutes and they leave the baby behind. So you decide to set their house on fire. You call the news media, you call the ambulance, you call the fire department, you get them to go there. And of course, the news media is going to film the event. You end up going outside of your house, rushing out to the cameras and say, oh my God, there's a baby in there. And you run into the house while it's on fire and you pull out that baby, rescuing that baby. You are now a hero in the eyes of the people who saw you do that, but they didn't see you start the fire. That's what governments throughout history have done, is they basically start the fire, they get people to react to that situation, and then they go crashing in, pulling out 1 or 2 things that makes them look like the hero, even though they were the ones that started it.
Yeah. It's a crazy. I mean, it's a beautiful system. If you were the one that's setting this whole thing up, it's beautiful because you perpetuate a situation where people can't question you, and you continue kicking the can down the road and trying to exert as much power and hold on as much power as you like. I mean, from a purely business perspective, it's perfect, right?
Well, it's pure genius because all the information, I mean, I can understand hundreds of years ago when the average person couldn't even read and write. I could see how difficult it would be to find out information. But in a day and age where you are 1 click away from any situation, it's amazing how people choose to be blissfully and willfully ignorant, which it's kind of like the best way scenario is if you're dreaming the best dream in the world and you're fantasizing that you're a superhero and you have all the women and money that you want and you're famous, but you're sleeping in a bed where your house is on fire. It doesn't matter how great the dream is, because if you stay asleep, you're not going to be ending up in any good place.
Right.
So when it comes to law and when it comes to knowledge, they want to separate those two as much as possible, because law is based on presumption. They are presuming that you know it. And if you don't know it, well, as they say, ignorance of the law is no excuse. So, for example, they always try and make the beneficial parts of something. Like, for example, they talk about free trade agreements. That sounds really good. Oh, it's free trade. We could trade with other countries. That sounds great. But what they don't tell you is there's a tax that we get charged if we have a business. So if you open a business in America, you have to pay taxes. Now, if you go overseas, they don't have to pay those same taxes. Because of the free trade agreement, they're exempt from those taxes, which means if I am selling the same product as someone else overseas is selling, they have an advantage because they don't have to pay the taxes, which means they can sell theirs for cheaper, which means I lose my business. And that's why you see all these jobs going overseas, but they'll never talk about that. When the government talks about, for example, the job market, and they talk about the numbers of employment, they don't tell you that the numbers include part-time workers. They just consider them employed. Or seasonal workers. Like, you notice they do a lot of the things right after Christmas, because they had all of those people getting those part-time jobs working at Christmas wrapping stores and things like that, or dressing up as Santa. So they give you this illusion, because if you don't check them, then you'll never know. So they will give you what's called hidden in plain sight. It's all there for you to check, but they want you distracted by watching the Super Bowl, watching the latest Hollywood gossip, listening to the great music to keep you occupied, let you party and drink and have all your free porn on the internet you want. As long as you're distracted, you will never know what's going on. And it's so bad. And it's like a mad scientist genius how they've planned this.
Oh, totally.
Oh, yeah. People like you and I, we will be hated on by the very people we're trying to help, because it's like us waking them up from that amazing dream. They don't know that their house is on fire. They're just dreaming and wondering why you're trying to wake them up.
Uh-huh.
So it's an uphill battle, but it's one that I just refuse to give up on.
Yeah, it's fascinating too. When you dive into law and contract, people don't realize just how deep. I mean, contract law and all of this law structure, it's so incredible. It goes into language. It gets, if you really go deep, it gets into philosophy, it gets into spirituality, understanding who you are and understanding that you're not your name and all of these things. It's a fascinating thing. And I think one of the most fascinating things about it is the whole private public side of all of this stuff, where you have the public, and that's basically what's happening out there on stage for everyone to see. The court systems are public. The court systems are just basically to perpetuate the system, and all this stuff that happens we think is happening in the private. It's really happening in the public. What happens in private never makes the news. It never makes anything. I mean, that's where all the change happens, right? Is in the private side of all this stuff.
Yeah, well, who regulates what can and cannot be said in the news media? The government. Mm-hmm. Who controls the medicines and what can be placed in them, or who controls what can be placed into food? Who controls what can be said broadcasting over the airwaves? What about your schools? It's all government run. There's a reason for that, because then you can control the information that goes out and in, whether it's truthful, exaggerated, or neglected. But one of the biggest things I recommend for anybody, if you want to learn, there's a term in law called legalese, which it means legal definitions, which means the words that you and I say in regular English are different when it comes to law definitions and legal definitions. So if you don't understand or understand that information, again, ignorance of the law is no excuse. So one of the things I highly recommend for anybody to get is the Black's Law Dictionary. I always say at least 5th edition or less, because they're trying to slowly change the definitions to kind of keep you away from these things. And I'll give you a prime example. If I said the word person, what does that mean to you?
Well, I think it would just mean just a regular person walking down the street. That's what everyone thinks it means.
Right. And under normal English, that's exactly what it means. But the word person in law, I'll read it directly from the Black's Law Dictionary. This is on the Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition. This is page 567. One of the different definitions legally of the word person is an entity such as a corporation created by law, giving certain legal rights and duties of a human being. So according to that, if you are legally defined as a person, you are a corporation, which is what we talk about when it comes to the legal name, because it all comes down to admiralty law, which is law of the sea. Mm-hmm. It supersedes law of the land. And now most people will say things like, well, how could that work? Like, for example, in the United States, because we're not underwater. Well, if you notice the Washington Monument, which is an Egyptian obelisk, by the way, I find that funny how much Egyptian symbolism is in our government.
Oh, it's everywhere.
Yeah, you'll see a little brass ring, a little brass bar about 3 feet around the Washington Monument, which no one really knew what that was. Mm-hmm. That's a water marker. So anything below that brass line is technically considered underwater. So even though you are on quote unquote dry land, the law is actually the law of the sea. And that's why, for example, if you look in any court, like you ever go past the McDonald's or something, or some restaurant, you see an American flag.
Oh, it's everywhere. Oh, yeah.
Right. You ever notice court flags have yellow fringe around them?
Yeah, that means something.
It's maritime law. Mm-hmm. That's a wartime flag. They're only in government buildings, because you notice that is not an original design to the flag. So it's not a pretty decoration. They do this so if you don't understand what it means, they can put it right in front of you and you won't think twice about it. That's why if you drive past your local McDonald's or some other restaurant and you see an American flag, you'll never see that gold fringe around those flags. Yeah, but people will never pay attention to that.
Yeah, and people don't realize too that like all of that stuff, like you draw a box around, like on money, if you draw, if you look on the edges, there's a square box that goes around the whole entire dollar bill, and you know, all of that means something. People, you know, there's nothing insignificant about the flag or about dollar bills that's there just for pretty design. It all means something.
It's all in codes and messages. You have to decipher them in order to crack the code. I mean, you could, if you're in war with an enemy and you capture their documents, and let's say those documents explain everything they have, everything they're going to do, all the weapons, all the money, where they're going to attack. If you cannot decipher those codes, they are useless to you. So it's called hidden in plain sight. I mean, I'll give you an example. If you and I lived next door, and I've been researching that there's going to be a tsunami, which I hope doesn't happen. So I'm just saying hypothetically. And I try and warn people, and they all say, oh, you're crazy. It's not going to happen. And you understand it because you research it too. And I say to you, if you see me turn on my lights 3 times at night, that means the tsunami's on its way. Get the hell out of here. So if I turn on my light 3 times, if you see that, what are you going to do?
I'm out.
Okay. Now, let's say everybody else on the street saw me do that. What does that mean to them? Absolutely nothing. So it doesn't matter that I did it and you understood it. It's the fact that everybody else can see it, have no idea what it means, so they don't pay attention to it. So you and I would be the only ones that left. Everybody else would have the situation. So you can have situations that are in newsprint, that are in movies, that are in media, in songs, and you don't understand those words. That's why when you have the word realize, you have to have real eyes. It's all in the definitions, because if you ever saw any movie about magic, one of the reasons that they always say words in magic, you know, you don't understand what they mean, but if you take it down to its essence, a word is nothing more than vibration. Vibration is energy moving at different speeds. Energy can affect you. And if you don't think so, have somebody put nails on a chalkboard and watch yourself cringe. Because even though it's not quote unquote physically affecting you, it is. So sound can affect you, and words are nothing more than sound. And if you ever hear the expression, sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me, that is so far from the truth, because I can have a bone broken, it will heal. If somebody said something to me when I was a child that devastated me, I will not only not forget it, but it could affect me 50 years later.
Yeah, it's fascinating because I mean, I do a show on alternative health, and you know, there's been lots of studies that have been shown where sound vibration can help heal people, help heal bones, and things like that. You know, it's really interesting. We had a show a couple of days ago with a guy, and we were talking about, he was a doctor from Hawaii, and we're talking about vaccinations and things. And, you know, he was saying how unlawful it is that they're able to vaccinate people and they're able to do all these things to people. And, you know, it's against the law. We need to fight and all this stuff. And he was a PhD, super smart guy. But it doesn't matter how smart you are. If you're unfamiliar with a certain area of life, your only reaction is just to simply, you know, protest and rebel. And I felt like saying, you know, when we were born, we gave the right to our physical body, the right of ownership, which is control. We can't. They could literally just house all of us up and put us in prison if they wanted to, because we don't own our bodies. We think that we are the owners of our bodies, but we're really not. You know?
Well, you know why they don't do that? Because if you tried to round up everybody, what's the first thing they will do? They will resist. And then they will realize that they are outnumbered. So they do something smarter. They let you roam free, thinking you have freedom of choice. That's why if you think about voting for a president, what do you have? Freedom of choice? You have Democrat or you have Republican. And if you think of symbolism, what is our national bird? It's an eagle. Now, you always see the eagle with its wings spread. That gives the illusion of separation. Now, what do you have with those wings? You have a left wing and you have a right wing. Where does that sound familiar in government?
Never heard that one before. Never heard left wing or right wing before.
Yeah, because what do they have? They have an eagle has two wings. The wings are spread apart. It's a symbolism of separation. Look how far apart my wings are. Yep. You have the left wing and you have the right wing. But when you bring the wings in, what are they connected to? They're connected to the same entity. So they're showing you in plain sight. Look at the symbolism of the bird, which is a repetition of the phoenix, which again goes back to Egyptian symbolism. It's all hidden in plain sight. It's all the idea of saying, here, hey, dumb people, here it is. Figure it out. We're not going to teach you, so you're never going to figure it out. But when people do, they hire people to trash them and attack them. So you ever notice that when you try and speak truth, it will never go viral because they will control the outlet. They will pay people to actually troll channels to harass people, make you feel embarrassed, make you feel scared, and make you stop. Mm-hmm. And that's why when we talked in the beginning about my original channel, Barnone11970, before I knew a majority of this stuff, I let it happen. But then I realized fear is a choice. We have been conditioned to learn fear because if you were a baby and you were just born, and I hope no one ever does this, but if I put you in a, let's say, a big container filled with tarantulas, you would probably play with them because they're fuzzy, cute little things moving around. You wouldn't know that they're actually something to be afraid of. So fear is a taught emotion. Mm-hmm. But everybody thinks fear is negative. Have you ever been on a roller coaster?
Oh, yeah.
You get scared, but isn't it fun?
It's very fun. The other day, it's funny, this example you gave, there's a video going around. I saw this little girl who had obviously never been exposed to a snake before, but she picked up a snake and was playing around with it, had no idea that it was something to be afraid of. No idea.
Yeah, so fear is good and it's bad. It's all about the perception, because if you're afraid of a tiger, you won't go near it. So what does that do? It saves your life. Mm-hmm. If you jump out of an airplane and go skydiving, that euphoria you feel is from the fear that you had. So like they say, there's nothing to fear but fear itself. It controls you. So what they get you to think is through certain emotions and certain one-dimensional thinking, you don't think in an infinite universe with infinite possibilities. You can go in every route. And I'll give you an example of how they control you easily. And they only make you focus on the things you see. Let's say you have a glass and they use the whole filling it halfway with water. Now, what would you say it is?
A glass half full of water.
Okay. They give you two choices when you don't realize there's technically three. Some people will say the glass is half empty. Some people will say the glass is half full. It's completely full, because did they tell you what is it filled with? The first half is water. The second half is oxygen, dust particles, molecules you can't see. So they get you to think only in the physical aspect. They're thinking you can only focus on what you see. So just ignore what you can't, because then technically it doesn't exist. So whether they get you to think the glass is half full or the glass is half empty, you're only focusing on the physical part and not realizing the things that you can't see are still there. Mm-hmm. And that's based on a belief system. So I tell people all the time, if you look around you, you will not see one air molecule. So you could say, oh, well, I can't see it, so it must not be there, so I don't believe it. Does that mean you're not breathing it?
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating thing, this whole law thing, because we're all playing in it, whether we like it or not. We're all deeply entrenched in it. Anytime you go drive a car, you are literally, have contracts with hundreds of contracts are probably happening every time you simply drive a car, and we don't realize how deeply how deep in our lives all of this stuff is. And I think one of the biggest things that people don't realize is silence is acquiescence. Contracts don't have to be written; they can be simply verbal. And if one party doesn't object to the contract or come back with another offer, the contract stands.
It's all about consent. Like if me and a bunch of people were going to dinner and we all agreed we're going to pay for our own food, and at the end we're like, oh, you know what? Let's all slice up a piece of cake. And let's say there's 8 of us, and they give us a cake with 9 slices. So there's 1 slice left over, and I say out loud to everybody, I'm going to take that last piece of cake. Now I've made a claim.
Right.
That is a trust that I'm creating.
Right.
Now, people can either say, no, you can't have it. Yes, you can have it. or make a contract saying, let's divide it, or let's think of something, or they could say nothing at all. So if I say I'm going to have that piece of cake and I say it out loud, creating a verbal trust, and nobody responds, under legal definitions of law, I am legally making a claim to that no one's contested, which is the same as them saying, go ahead and take it. Right. So when people say nothing, it's the same as agreeing. And that's why they complain about laws that are being passed and saying how unfair they are. But we're not doing anything. So we're consenting to it, making that law last as long as we complain but not do anything about it.
And then one of the weirdest things is that there's so much, I'm not sure what the right word is, but there's so much information that gives, or that goes out to younger people that basically says if you protest, then things will change, or if you vote, things will change. But in reality, that's just like you send your child to his room for the evening, and he just screams and yells in his room. It really doesn't matter how loud he screams, because if you want, you could just soundproof the room and you don't have to hear the screams. That stuff doesn't do anything,
It makes them money, because as long as you do what they tell you to do, they make it easy for you. Voting, you just have to go and click your whatever you want to vote, or you don't even have to do it at all. It's not the votes that count, it's the people who tabulate them.
Hey, have you seen the documentary Hacking Democracy?
That one I haven't seen, but if you want to tell me what it's about, I'm sure there's many videos and different ones that'll be very similar.
Oh, yeah. We're trying to get her on the show as well. Bev Harris. So she was a lady that was working in the polls up in Seattle, I think, for one of the Bush elections. And what happened was she was tabulating the votes, or managing that particular area. And so one night she goes home and she tries to do some research on the companies. There's apparently one or two companies that control the counting and the tabulating of the votes, right? This like electronic companies. So she starts doing a little research, starts poking around, and she's somehow able to download by accident. The company did this by accident, but she was able to download the source code for these tabulating, these companies that are counting the votes. So what happened was she went through the source code, didn't really understand it. It was a bunch of code. She sends it off to a professional programmer. He comes back and says, yeah, there's systems written within the code that allow for manipulation and actually have manipulation built into the entire system. And so it's this whole documentary about her journey through the legal process of making this come out. And ever since then, it's just like, what in the world is going on with this whole voting thing? It's bizarre, It's
to make you feel like you're having a part of the system, even though you don't. It makes you think you're doing something.
Yeah.
Oh, you got to vote. Well, they tabulate it. And you haven't noticed something, because they're always saying anybody can become president. Have you, in the history of the United States alone, seen one poor president? Somebody that started out as a homeless person and rose up to the top. You ever noticed they're all multi-millionaires?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's no coincidence.
Right. If you have a better chance of voting for Miss America, because at least they have a variety of people you can choose from. In the presidency, again, you have the left wing and you have the right wing. So it's like me having up both of my fists, and I say, you get to pick which one punches you in the face.
Right.
Isn't that freedom of choice? You don't like either one of them. That's what they make you think. Again, with the symbolism, the left wing and the right wing to the eagle. You'll have the Democrats over here saying one thing to make some people happy. Then you'll have the Republicans are saying the exact opposite to make the other half happy, but they all connect to the same entity. And in the end, they're playing golf together, they're profiting off of each other, and they're profiting off of the people. They just say different things because it gets you to divide and conquer and hate someone else instead of hating the people that are causing the fight.
Yes.
So they take away the anger towards them. And presidents are nothing more than people who run corporations. Mm-hmm. They are not in control, because I'll give you another example. Let's say I owned McDonald's. I am the owner of McDonald's, and I decide to hire you as the president of my company. So now you're the president of McDonald's. I'm the owner. I'm your boss. Can you decide to say, I'm going to sell Burger King food at McDonald's?
No way.
Why not?
Because although it looks like I control thing, because I'm the sort of public face of the of McDonald's at that location, I don't own the place.
Exactly. Kings run countries. Presidents run corporations. So if you ever learned the fact that the United States is a corporation, the president is a punching bag. So you can put all your anger on him that has no authority to do anything other than what he's told to do. It's the people who finance everything that are in charge. But if you're angry at him, who can't really do anything, because if you're the president of my company, if you even tried to do it, I could stop it or fire you. So you'll do what I tell you if you want my job. And if you want to be president, you get a lot of benefits from that.
Yeah, and people don't realize, like you said, the president is basically, he's president of a corporation. I mean, it's set up as a corporation. I think there's even some legal documents, right, that talks about this, like 20...
The Act of 1871. Yeah. It was because of the lies about the Civil War. They make you think it's all about slavery, which is part of the equation. But again, that gets white people to hate black people and black people to hate white people. Again, divide and conquer. I don't hate somebody unless they're evil. I love all people, because remember, like even with the Orlando shooting, they were trying to say about it gay versus straight. Yeah. Aren't they human beings? Do we seem to forget that everybody is a human being, but we always label them different religions, different nationalities, different colors? Again, divide and conquer. So with the Civil War, there was so much damage because we fought in our country that the cost to repair everything was beyond our capability. The country was going to file for bankruptcy. When you file for bankruptcy, other countries can come in, annex your country, and now you're a state owned by several different people. So what happened was the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers from the Bank of England made a proposal to the 41st Congress on September 21st, the 21st Congress on September 21st, 1871. Now, just imagine if you're working in that Congress. I'll play devil's advocate with you and see what you'd say. You are about to go down in history as the government that lost America because you're going to go bankrupt. You can't pay all your debts. You're going to have to sell your country. All of a sudden, the Bank of England comes along and says, we're going to save you. We're not only going to give you all the money you need, we're going to lend you all the money that you need so your country doesn't go bankrupt. You can repair the country, become technologically advanced with all the extra money, and you as a politician and your family will be wealthy beyond all your dreams. All we want is 10 square miles of your country. Would you have done it back then?
Of course.
Okay, so they thought that was a great deal. So wait a minute. We were about to go bankrupt. We were going to lose the country. We were going to go down in history as the government that lost America. And all of a sudden, there's a bank that comes along and says, we'll loan you not only all the money you need to repair, but to actually thrive, and your government and your family will be successful. All you have to do is give 10 square miles. Where do I sign up? Well, those 10 square miles was Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is its own country. It's owned by the Bank of London. So the way they tricked everyone, because if you lived in that 10 square mile radius, you are now no longer part of America. You are part of the United States. The word is the corporate name. Like, for example, if I say to you, and I'll keep using McDonald's because I just use that as a name that people are familiar with. Yeah. If I ask you, what's the corporation of McDonald's, what would you say is the corporation of McDonald's?
What do you mean, the name, or what are you saying?
Well, what do you think is on average? If I said, tell me what the corporation of McDonald's is, what would you think? And it's the reason why it's a little hard, because most people won't know.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I know I know how they make their money, which is primarily in real estate. But if you're, I guess like McDonald's, I would say the name McDonald's LLC or something like that.
There you go. Most people will say it's a building, or it's a corporate headquarters, it's their main office. It's none of those things. The corporation McDonald's is just the name McDonald's, which is registered and trademarked. That's why if you've ever had a business, you send them money, they register your name. Mm-hmm. So the name is the business, is the corporation. The building is what is created from that corporation. So anything that's a corporation is nothing more than a name. So when I talk about you as a corporation, it's not that you're a building. It's your name is registered as a trademarked incorporation. So when it comes to the word United States, they incorporated it. And when they created the 13th Amendment, it all had to do with legally defining the word slavery, which was legally defined as involuntary servitude. What that means is I can't take, if I as the government, if you went to go vote, they cannot put a gun to your head and make you do it. But if you do it yourself, you volunteer your servitude.
Right.
So when they legally defined the 13th Amendment as involuntary servitude, they could scare you, like you see in the news all the time. They can make you think you have no choice, but ultimately they don't put a gun to your head, so you do it with your own free will, which means the 13th Amendment does not protect you because you are volunteering your servitude. So that's why they redefined what that legal name was. So the way they entrapped all Americans is because you haven't noticed the words, they're always having people chant USA, USA.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, everywhere.
It should be US of A, because what people don't understand is the letter O and F of is a separation in law. It's United States of America. America is the continent. But the word United States was created because of the Act of 1871. They incorporated it, the 10 square miles of Washington, D.C. Now, the way they entrap people is they legally define the word citizen. You ever notice how politicians are always telling you what good citizens you are?
Oh, of course. It's embedded in language.
Right. So I'm going to go to the book again, the Black's Law Dictionary, and I'm going to read you the legal definition of the word citizen. Citizen, a person. Remember, I already gave the legal definition of person. So it's already telling you there, so you have to look in several places. So it's listed as a person who by either birth or naturalization is a member of a political community owning allegiance to the community and being entitled to all of its civil rights.
Civil rights.
If you look up, right. So if you look up the word person, it's a corporation. So you have to go all over the place. If you look up civil rights, it says the individual rights of a personal liberty guaranteed by the Bill of Rights. Now get this, by the 13th, 14th, and the 15th Amendments. Now remember, I said the 13th Amendment has to do with involuntary servitude. So if they get you to volunteer to do something, you've done it on your own. The 13th Amendment no longer qualifies. So you're a legal slave by your own ignorance, because ignorance of the law is no excuse. So in the original agreement in the Act of 1871, they're saying, oh, it's only 10 square miles. We don't have to worry. What they did was they created the jurisdiction, which means that when you sign a driver's license, the first thing they ask you is, are you a U.S. citizen? What did you check?
Oh, everyone just checks yes.
Right. So they said through their own servitude, because no one put a gun and said, you have to check that box.
Or you have to get a driver's license. They just make it sound so good.
They give you a little cherry. They put the carrot in front of the donkey to make it run. And what is a donkey? It's a jackass. So they get you to think you need these things. So they trick you into volunteering your own servitude, which takes away your 13th Amendment rights of protecting you against illegal slavery. And since you don't know the legal definition of the word citizen, you have now put yourself under the jurisdiction of the corporation known as the United States, which means you are now a traitor to your own country. So the U.S. Postal Service, the U.S. military, everything U.S. is actually owned by Britain because it is under the jurisdiction of the Washington, D.C. 10-mile square radius. It is a corporation. But because you see the word United States, you think that's the country. Right. And they use the admiralty law to fool you because it all has to do with water and it also has to do with death. It's all in the words. So, for example, money can be found in a bank. Okay. Now, where else can you find a bank? A bank is located on either side of a river. What does a river do? It flows. Where does it flow? To the sea. What's another name for flow? How about a current? Current sea. Money flow. You ever wonder why you're drowning in debt? Your house is underwater. You're liquidating your assets. It all has to do with learning about the definitions so you can understand admiralty law is what's in control.
Right. Yeah. And what people aren't really aware of is that we our true essence, our true self is the captain of our vessel, but we're not the vessel. So, you know, if a cop pulls you over, they're really pulling over the car, but you're in control of the car, but you don't own the car, but you're in control. So that's why, in the same way with you as a person or as a physical entity, they have the right to do what they want to do with your physical nature, as long as you don't understand as a pure essence. If you don't understand the law, then you don't get to choose what happens to your body. You know,
right.
It's everywhere.
You can't kill somebody and a cop pulls you over and arrests you and you say, oh, I didn't know that I couldn't do that. They're not going to say, oh, you didn't know? Okay, we'll let you go.
Yeah.
So if you don't, and they don't teach you these things. That's why the word understand in legal definitions is, do you stand under their authority? So when they tell you, you're hereby sentenced for such and such charges, do you understand the charges presented? They're saying, are you guilty? Yeah. So what do you say? You say yes. So you don't understand what you're doing. So lawyers are not going to tell you that, because whether you are going to jail or whether you pay a fine or you're completely innocent, they get paid. So they're part of the scam, whether they know it or not. And it's all about entrapping people through their own ignorance by using legal definitions that you think are just plain English words. Mm-hmm. And the sad part is, the majority of people hearing this will say, if they're not knowledgeable and don't research, their instinct is to say it's crazy. That's what makes their plan so ingenious, that all you have to do is look this up to prove it to be accurate, and they'll just automatically dismiss it without checking. And that's what they want.
The hardest thing to do is to be so good at this sort of understanding of law, to be able to stand on your claims. That's where you could be an expert in all of this stuff, but if you can't hold and stand on your claims, they're so good at law and contract law and everything that they do. They're experts at it. And so if you're unable to stand on your claim, then it's nearly difficult. And they'll do everything they can possibly do to get you to waver and falter or be fearful and to not be able to stand on your claim, or to hire an attorney or hire a lawyer. And then once you do that, you might as well not even proceed any further, because it's not going to go in your direction.
Yeah, the way I tell people is, and again, I always like to do physical thoughts because it makes people understand things or understand things a little bit better. Yeah. Let's say you're on a pirate ship, you got kidnapped, and you're hundreds of miles out in the middle of the ocean. You have no idea where you are. Let's say there are 100 crew members, all with guns. They kidnap 5,000 people. And every now and then, when one person gets out of line, they shoot that person and throw him overboard and say, if you want to get out of line, that's going to be you. So you have 5,000 people against 100, but those 5,000 are creating the ability to clean the ship, do what they're told for fear of being shot and thrown overboard. Now, let's say one of those people says to the captain, I want to be free. And the captain, for some reason, of the goodness of heart, says, okay, you're free. So now you're on that boat in the middle of nowhere. You don't have to do the work, but are you going anywhere you want to be? Because the others are keeping you back. Now, if the 5,000 people all decided, guess what? We outnumber them. We have 5,000 people. They have 100. Yes, they have guns, but they don't have enough guns to kill all of us. So they can actually, if they all united and went to the captain, if the captain woke up, came out of his room, to see 5,000 of the people say, we're taking over this ship, what is that captain going to do? Nothing. So if people understood that if the people actually, instead of bickering and arguing, instead of fighting everybody and trolling people's accounts that are trying to do good, if the people actually said no more, we wouldn't have to pull one trigger. We wouldn't have to shoot anybody. We would basically say, this isn't this document, the Bill of Rights, supposed to be we the people? Please show me where it says we the government. It's the people that control it, but they've gotten you to be conditioned that you need them, so they give you free things that are not free. Mm-hmm. Like, prime example, they talk about how the government has guaranteed your student loan. That sounds great, doesn't it? But what the thing is, just imagine if you're that college. If you know that you could put out any loan you want and the government is going to buy it regardless of the person's credit, well, you're going to raise the prices of your tuition, aren't you?
Oh, of course.
Because you're getting paid. So you ever wonder why school has gotten so expensive since the government took over? Mm-hmm. And last I checked, that's not capitalism, is it? That's not democracy. In a capitalist society, you take the risk of building a business, and if it fails, that's the price to pay. But when the government steps in and takes over for things like healthcare and things like backing up mortgages and things like that. That is now socialism and fascism. And yet we still applaud this because it sounds good, because it's supposedly free.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? Hey, so I know you got to get going. I don't want to keep you too long. I know that you have to take off, but I wanted to ask you a couple questions before we finish. First of all, where did you learn a lot of this stuff? Because people are going to be listening and they're going to be thinking, dude, I need to learn. I can share where I learned some of my stuff, and it's a lifetime of learning, just so people know. Yes. It's a lifetime of learning and a journey. So where did you learn a lot of your stuff?
A lot of it is I got the Constitution. I read the actual words. I got the Black's Law Dictionary. You look up the words. There's lots of different YouTube videos. There's lots of books that you could read. Let me see if I have one of the books. A book that you could read really quick, it's a short read, is The Devil and Daniel Webster by Stephen Vincent Bennett. There are plenty of books that you could get on money and currency and values. Learn all you can about admiralty law. It's one of those things, if you have a passion for something, even if it was once difficult to find, all of a sudden it's going to be all over the place for you.
Oh, you'll find it everywhere.
Yes, so don't limit yourself to one idea, one person, one individual thing. The more you learn, the more you'll know, and you will get to so many different levels. I've gotten to the point now, I don't worry about this stuff that much anymore, because it's all about consent, even of the mind. If you want to believe, if you go into quantum physics and everything, where one of the reasons Einstein quit is because he had a very hard time believing that when he wasn't looking at the moon, it wasn't there anymore. If people don't understand what it has to do with, it's amazing that you control your own quote unquote reality, because if anything, even on the physical level is physical, it's nothing more than atoms, which is electric light vibrating in different particles. There's no such thing as physical. So you can actually create whatever belief system. So if they create this world that you think is full of all these laws that you have no control over, well, you won't make any effort. So you're actually proving their claim to be true based on your own consent. So when the people start realizing that they're Dorothy and have the power to go home all along, they can do anything once they realize they have the power. If you think you can't get a job and you keep saying, oh, well, you know, I can't find the job, you're not going to be motivated. You'll probably stay at home eating bonbons, watching TV. So you've created your own truth. So if you want to find out this information, start searching. And you will find plenty of things that will start justifying what you need to learn. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to limit it to any one person, but learn the Act of 1871. Learn legal definitions. Learn about admiralty law. Learn the fact that governments can't own anything. If you learn canon law, which actually supersedes admiralty law, you would understand that everything in life is what's called the right of usage, which means no one can own anything. Because when you die, you could give it away, but you can't take it with you. So you don't legally own anything. So if people actually learn that banks don't own mortgages, which, by the way, the term mortgage is actually called death pledge, they don't own it. They own the piece of paper. So when you're sending in your payment every month for the title of the house that you think you own, you're giving them money for that piece of paper that says the word title. They don't actually own the property. And they get you to have definitions that you don't understand. Because like I said, definitions are based on water and death. Well, if they ask you, where are you from? Most people will say, like, I live New York. They'll say, where do you live? Oh, I live in New York. Well, really? I didn't know you lived underground. You live on New York. You don't live in it. Only dead people live underground. Right. So if you say I'm in California or I'm in Texas, even though it sounds silly, under legal definitions of canon law, you actually are admitting you must be a corpse, a fictional entity, because why else would you be living underground? That's why when you open your eyes, you awake. Well, where else can you go to awake? When do you usually get up in the morning? In the morning. Where else can you mourn? It all has to do with legal words. They sound silly because if you think they're silly, you'll ignore them and it will continue.
Mm-hmm. And what people don't know too is we actually live in our bodies, really. You know, we don't live, you know, we have a corporeal experience and experience the world through our physical bodies. That's where we live. That's where our spirit lives. But, you know, we don't live in New York or in California. I'm in California. You're in New York, or you're on New York. I mean, that's where you are. That's where your body is, but that's not where you live, you know? And, you know, it was an interesting quote. I think it was one of the Rockefellers. Didn't he say that, The quote goes something like, "Own nothing, control everything."
Right.
Yeah.
You ever wonder why the most enlightened people don't own anything?
Yeah, they control everything.
Because the more you own, the more it keeps you down. It's all about vibrations. It all has to go down to energy. When you think of that, people think it's magic. Well, you know what? Is a microwave magic? Your food is being cooked by energy you can't see. That doesn't make it magic. It just means your physical eyes are not capable of seeing the light and energy that is being projected. Universally speaking, we're blind. You can't see ultraviolet rays. You can't see radioactive waves. You can't see radio waves, but they're still there. And I'll give you a prime example. Yes, we're humans being what? We're full of emotions. Can you show me what body part creates jealousy? What rage looks like? You can't, because they don't technically exist, but yet you feel them. So if they can get you into a belief system, whether you believe or don't believe, you don't know. So they can control you either way. So you can listen to what we're saying here and say, oh, I believe it. Or you could listen to what we say and I think this is a bunch of garbage. Either way, you don't know. If you don't research yourself, you will never have knowledge. And there's a difference between being smart and being wise. A smart person regurgitates the most of what other people teach you. Wisdom is what you learn through your own experience. They want smart people. That's why they give you certificates when you go to a school. But they don't want wise people.
Yeah. Yeah, fascinating stuff. All right, so where can people find you? I know you got to take off. Is the best place for people to find you or find your work on YouTube?
Yep, I have my YouTube channel, Barnone11970. I've been there for about 4 or 5 years. I'm close to getting 25,000 subscribers at this point. It's amazing stuff. I talk about different forms of religion and what you really need to know about it, the governments. I talk about gold and silver. I've escalated the points about how your emotions can control you, legal definitions. It's all about me just being a regular person who got tired of all the BS that I was seeing.
I hear you.
And the more you research yourself, the more you will awaken your own mind, because your mind is like every other muscle. If you don't use it, it weakens. So they want you to be smart enough to run the machines, but never smart enough to question why. Yeah. Because if you want a movie that will help you, watch the movie Ants, the Disney movie Ants. Because that movie is, if you change the ants into the people and the grasshoppers into the government, they're telling you exactly what you need to do. That the grasshoppers in that movie control the ants, make them do the work because they're bigger and stronger and scarier, and threaten to injure them if they didn't gather their food for them. And at the end of that movie, the ants realize, wait a minute, we don't need them, they need us. We outnumber them 10-1. And then all of a sudden, once they all united together and they were no longer fearful, they got control of their lives back. And it's the same thing with the people. When you lose the fear, you lose the hatred and anger, and you all unite for one cause, you can fix everything.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. A couple people that I have done some research on, if people are interested, there's some people over at creditorsincommerce.com. There's some issues going on with them right now, from what I understand. But the guy named Winston Shrout is another guy you can look into. There's tons of people, but like we were just talking about, it's important to not get any of your information from one source. Take little bits from what everyone does and do your own research, and that's where it really starts going, doesn't it?
Yep. The more choices you have, go with what you resonate with, because, like I said, they'll teach you into thinking of only what you can see. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. That's what they want. So if you want to comply to that, don't be surprised your life is not going in the direction you want, because instead of realizing you're Superman, you're waiting for Superman to come save you. And that day will never come. So if you're looking for a savior, you're it.
Yep. Dude, we'll end on that. That was awesome. All right. So if you want to go check out more of his Barnone11970's videos, just type that into YouTube, Barnone11970, and you can subscribe there and get I think his website's connected to that as well. Hey, thanks for being on today.
Oh, it was my pleasure. I know we had a little bit of a phone tag or email tag for a while, but I'm glad we got on. And anytime you ever want to do it again, I'm definitely all for it.
Dude, I think that we could do something like this, because you and I sound so similar in terms of just everything we think about, even in terms of spirituality and politics and religion and all that stuff. I'd love to do it, more often if you're able.
Absolutely. Like I always say, life is full of magnets and energy. Magnetism. You always attract what you passionately feel. Doesn't matter what you lie to yourself about, it's what you feel. There's no coincidence that we have the same kind of thought patterns, because they seek one another out. You project what you feel out in the universe, it comes back with what you're looking for, so it reinforces your version of the truth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's what it's all about.
I found you by quote chance, which wasn't really chance, through YouTube. So I'm stoked to finally get a chance to talk with you. I know we went back and forth, but man, keep up the good work and what you're doing, and don't think for a second, all the negativity if people are saying stuff about you or saying stuff to you. Just keep going.
Nope. At first they are scared of you, then they mock you, and then one day they appreciate you. So that's why if you see the title of my thing, it says uniting the people one person at a time. If I get one person to change their life for the better, that's one less person that's sad, angry, suicidal, or dangerous.
Yep. And then you never know, that person could take your information and just blow up and have an influence to millions of people. You never know.
That's why you never give up.
Yep. All right, man. Awesome. Thank you. I'm gonna shut this down right now.
Well, it was a pleasure being with you. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
You're so welcome.